In the beginning of the story, we are shown a man named Frank Hawkins, who is a horse rider. He is also a dispatch rider, i.e. a messenger. Frank also has a wild horse named Hidalgo. Frank has participated in many long-distance horse races, of which he has won many races. One day, Frank gets the job of delivering a message to the 7th Cavalry Regiment. Frank doesn't know what is written in this message. After that, he delivers the message to the 7th Cavalry Regiment. In fact, the U.S. Army had surrounded a tribe named Lakota. And in this message, there is an order to kill those Lakota people. Frank reaches there and gives them a message and leaves from there. After that, the U.S. Army kills those Lakota people. But when Frank finds out that he has delivered a message to kill many innocent people, he feels very bad about it and he starts living in guilt from this incident. Frank and his horse Hidalgo are part of Buffalo Bill's show Wild West. Because of the show, Frank and Hidalgo are known as the world's greatest horse and rider. Another man performs with Frank, whose name is Chief Eaglehorn. Here Frank finds out that the government considers wild horses impure. So the government has ordered to catch all the wild horses and kill them. But Frank and Eaglehorn don't want this to happen. So they go to Buffalo Bill. Buffalo Bill tells them that this is the government's decision and I can't do anything about it. Hearing this, Frank and Eaglehorn are very disappointed. Now one day in Bill's show, Arab Amir Sheikh's relative Aziz and his companion Rao Rasmus Hussein come. They challenge Frank and Hidalgo to participate in the long-distance race here. They say that this race is 3,000 miles long, which is organized in a desert. That's why this race is called the Ocean of Fire. The winner in this race will be given a reward of $100,000. Frank accepts their challenge, but he doesn't have money to go to the Middle East. That's why he asks his friend for money. His friend saves that money for him and the next day, Frank leaves for Arabia to participate in this race. After this, Frank decides his rest of the journey in a sea ship. Here he meets a woman named Anne Davenport. Actually, Anne Davenport's horse is also going to participate in this race. After a few days of travel, Frank arrives in Arabia with his horse Hidalgo. Here we see an Arab sheik who is a horse rider and his breed is called Al-Kamsa. Actually, this breed is considered the fastest in the Arabs. Sheik is also going to race his horse Al-Hadal, whose rider will be the prince himself. Because he has promised the prince that if he wins the race, he will get his only daughter, Jazeera, married to him. After reaching Arabia, Frank meets Sheik. Actually, Sheik doesn't want Frank to win this race. But Frank is confident that he will win the race. Sheik's daughter Jazeera doesn't want to be the wife of the prince. That's why she wants Frank to win this race. That's why she supports Frank. Now the race starts and Frank moves forward in the race. But this race is not that easy, because they have to pass through the scorching desert. Now, due to the heat on the road, many horses die. It is very important for Frank to win this race. But they are having a hard time in the desert, because Frank and Hidalgo are not used to running in the desert. Now in the first round of the race, they face a very big sandstorm. To escape the sandstorm, Frank and Hidalgo enter a ruin. After a while, when the storm ends, Frank and Hidalgo come out of the ruin. All the water Frank has is ruined by the sandstorm. But despite this, they start their journey again. For a long time, Frank and Hidalgo travel in the desert. After this, the first round ends, and all the riders come back to their place. Due to the sandstorm, many riders die. Now after a while, his relative Kadib comes to meet Sheik. Actually, Kadib wants to take over the Al-Kamsa generation of Sheik's horses. And he asks Sheik to make him the owner of Al-Kamsa. But Sheik does not accept this, because Al-Kamsa has also raised his ancestors. That's why he refuses Cadeb. After this, we see Frank in the tent, where the island comes. She explains to Frank how he can survive in the desert with his horse. But then Sheik comes there, and he sees both of them together. Sheik does not accept this at all. That a stranger should talk to his daughter. Although the island also tries to explain to him that Frank did not call him here. In fact, she herself went to his tent, and Frank did not talk to her. But Sheik does not listen to him, and he orders Frank to be punished. He tells his men to cut Frank's private part. Now Sheik's men are ready to punish Frank. But then Cadeb's men attack them. Actually, Cadeb wants to get Sheik's horse Al-Hadal, because of which he attacked Sheik. But he runs away with Prince Al-Hadal. On the other hand, the island also opens Frank's hands. But Sheik's relative runs away with the book from Sheik's tent, which Sheik got from his ancestors, in which everything is written about raising Al-Kamsa's progeny. After this, Cadeb's men leave there, and now Sheik finds out that Cadeb has taken the island with him. And in return for the island, Cadeb has asked Sheik for his horse Al-Hadal. Sheik also finds out that Aziz has stolen that book from his tent, in which everything is written about Al-Kamsa. That's why he tells his men to catch Aziz. His men catch Aziz. Sheik asks him about that book. But Aziz says that I wanted to keep that book safe with me. But Cadeb's men took that book from me. That's why Frank comes in between and kills Aziz. He ties him with his horse. After which, even though Aziz does not want, Sheik has to tell the location of Cadeb. Sheik tells Frank that if he brings back the island and that book, then he will take his punishment back. After this, Frank and Aziz reach the place with another loyal man of Sheik, where Cadeb lives. Frank has also brought Al-Hadal horse with him. He hands over Al-Hadal horse to Cadeb, and in return, he frees the island from Cadeb. But after a while, Cadeb finds out that that horse is not Al-Hadal, but it is a white horse on which Frank has painted black, from which Cadeb gets angry. And for this betrayal, Cadeb's men attack Frank and his companions. The Sheik's man with Frank kills many people of Cadeb, but he himself is killed in this fight. Meanwhile, Jazeera steals her father's book from Cadeb, and Frank runs away with Jazeera. Whatever happened to Frank, Jazeera apologizes to Frank for it. After a while, Frank takes Jazeera to Sheik, and goes to his tent. After returning, and calls him to the tent. Actually, she wants to make a deal with him. She says that his horse should win this race at any cost. That's why she offers money to Frank to leave this race. But Frank refuses her. At the same time, Sheik also thanks Frank for saving Jazeera's life, and takes back his punishment. The next day, this race starts again. But this time this race is going to be very difficult for Frank, because Cadeb is waiting for him. Cadeb meets Anne, and Cadeb make a deal with each other, and tells Cadeb that his horse should win the race at any cost. In return, Anne's rider will tell Cadeb's men the location of Frank and Hidalgo, with which Cadeb can easily kill Hidalgo, and can also steal Sheik's horse Al-Hadal. Cadeb is also ready for this deal. Now Frank walks in the desert for many days after the race. And in this journey, he has to eat dead insects, because he is not getting any food in the desert. He feeds the same dead insects to his horse. Now a rider participating in this race, whose name is Sakar. He reaches a place and falls into the abyss. But then Frank passes through that place. He sees Sakar falling into the abyss. Actually, according to the rules, he is not allowed to help other riders during the race. But Frank does not care about the rules of the race. He takes Sakar out of the abyss and saves his life. After this, he moves on in his journey. Cadeb's men are constantly waiting for Frank. They want to kill Hidalgo. That's why they have dug some pits there and have covered them. Ann's rider signals to Cadeb's men that Frank is coming, and Cadeb's men attack Frank. They surround him from all sides and trap him in their laid trap. He falls into their dug pit with his horse, in which Hidalgo gets injured after falling. But Cadeb's men do not kill Frank, because Ann has forbidden them to do this. After this, they leave from there. Now Hidalgo is very injured. He is not able to come out of the pit. That's when Sacker reaches there. Sacker helps Frank and Hidalgo to come out of the pit. But then Cadeb's men leave their cheetahs on them. The cheetahs attack them. But Frank and Sacker kill those cheetahs together. Then Cadeb's men shoot Sacker, because of which he dies there. Cadeb tells Frank to fight with him. There is a fight between Frank and Cadeb. But very cleverly Frank puts Cadeb on his laid trap and pulls the rope and drops him in the same pit. After this, he moves forward on his journey. But his horse Hidalgo gets worse, and he falls down. Blood starts flowing from his nose. He is not able to move forward, because of which Frank becomes very sad and decides to kill him by pitying his horse. But then his ancestors come in front of him. Frank tells him to help him. Those souls motivate him and tell him to move forward. After which Frank decides that he will not kill his horse. Then Prince comes to him. He makes fun of him and tells him to go back. But then Frank's horse Hidalgo gets up again, and Frank sits on Hidalgo and moves forward in the race. Those people now reach very close to their destination. The race is about to end. Everyone is waiting for the winner of the race. Theron feels that her rider will win the race. Hidalgo is running very fast in the race. Frank first of all attacks Prince and Al-Hadal. He uses all the remaining power of Hidalgo to run away. And now Frank attacks Ann's rider. Blood starts flowing from Hidalgo's nose. But still he does not lose hope, and keeps running. And finally Frank wins this race. Jazeera is very happy to win Frank's race, because now she will not have to marry Prince. Now she comes to Frank and congratulates him for winning the race, and gives him a reward. Frank and Sheik become friends. Frank gifts Sheik his revolver, and the last time he meets Jazeera, and says bye to her. After this we see Frank's country, where the government officer has imprisoned all the wild horses. He is about to kill them. That's when Frank arrives there. Frank has an order in his hand, in which it is written that the officer has to free all the wild horses. Actually, Frank has bought all the wild horses with the money he got as a reward. That's why the officer frees all the wild horses. Frank is very happy to see those horses free. After this, Frank also frees his horse Hidalgo. With this, the movie ends.